Most gardeners wait until spring to plant, and I used to do the same. But I quickly realized that waiting means losing weeks of growth, and by extension, energy, sunlight, and soil fertility. A few years ago, I started experimenting with sowing vegetables indoors in February, and the results were game changing. By the time most gardeners planted outside, my seedlings were already strong, healthy, and ready to thrive. My spring harvest was bigger, faster, and more reliable, all because I started earlier under controlled conditions. Over time, I tested dozens of vegetables, trays, soil mixes, and lighting setups. I made plenty of mistakes, but each one taught me something new. Eventually, I narrowed it down to 10 vegetables that consistently give a huge advantage when started indoors in February. These are the crops I rely on every year, and in this video, I'll show you exactly how I start them, what mistakes to avoid, and how to get a strong early spring harvest. Before you plant a single seed, it's important to understand why starting indoors matters. Most beginners make the mistake of thinking seeds will grow anywhere as long as there is soil and light. I've been there. I remember the first time I planted peppers and tomatoes in a dimly lit corner window in February. The seedlings grew long, leggy, and weak. By the time I transplanted them outdoors, many had collapsed, and I lost almost an entire tray. The problem wasn't the seeds, it was the environment. Temperature, light, humidity, and timing are everything when starting indoors. I've learned that paying attention to these details early saves months of frustration and guarantees stronger plants ready for a spring transplant. The first vegetable I start indoors every February is tomatoes. They are the backbone of my spring garden, and without early sowing, it's impossible to get maximum yields. I use small seed trays filled with a light, well-draining seed starting mix. I plant the seeds shallowly, just beneath the soil surface, and keep them evenly moist. Temperature is critical. I aim for 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit for germination. One mistake I made early on was overwatering. The seedlings sprouted but then weakened, and some succumbed to damping off disease. I quickly adjusted my approach, providing gentle bottom heat, careful watering, and supplemental light. By following these steps, I now get strong, compact seedlings that are ready to transplant outdoors by mid to late April. Tomatoes are sensitive to frost, so starting them indoors gives me a 6 to 8 week head start compared to direct sowing. Peppers come next. Bell peppers, chili peppers, and other varieties are slower to germinate than tomatoes, which is why February is perfect. I plant them in small cells with a light cover of soil to retain moisture and keep a clear humidity dome on top until they sprout. Patience is key. Peppers can take 10 to 14 days to emerge. Early on, I tried rushing the process by keeping the soil too dry or too cold, and it resulted in low germination rates. Once I stabilized the temperature and used bottom heat, my germination rates increased dramatically. Peppers are sensitive to light too. Seedlings under weak natural light will stretch and become weak. Adding a grow light about 2 to 3 inches above the seedlings keeps them compact and strong, which makes for a much smoother transition outdoors. Eggplants are another slow grower that benefit from indoor starting. Their seeds germinate slowly, and the young plants are very sensitive to cold. I use small pots filled with a fine seed starting mix. Keep them warm with a heat mat and provide consistent light. I learned early that overwatering leads to weak roots, so I water lightly but frequently. Once the seedlings are established, they grow into robust, productive plants ready for transplanting when the soil has warmed outside. Eggplants are one of those crops where starting indoors truly determines the size and success of your harvest. Next are the brassicas, broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage. These crops tolerate cooler temperatures, making them ideal for early indoor sowing. I sow seeds in shallow trays, lightly cover them, and ensure they get plenty of light to avoid spindly growth. I used to cram seeds into trays thinking more plants meant more harvest, but overcrowding actually reduces success. I now thin seedlings early, giving each plant space to grow strong stems and roots. By the time I transplant them outdoors, the seedlings are ready to thrive even if the weather is still chilly. Starting indoors ensures they get a jump start and produce mature heads before the summer heat hits. Lettuce and kale are the next group I focus on. Both germinate quickly, but seedlings are delicate. I space them carefully in trays and monitor moisture closely to prevent damping off. I also make sure air circulates around them to prevent fungal problems. Lettuce benefits greatly from indoor sowing because it allows me to harvest early spring leaves while the outdoor soil is still too cold. Kale, being cold hardy, tolerates outdoor conditions well, but starting it indoors still produces larger, healthier plants ready to harvest continuously. I've experimented with different container depths, and for both crops, shallow trays work best as long as soil is kept moist but not waterlogged. Herbs are an important addition to my indoor February sowing. Basil is sensitive to cold and slow to germinate, so starting it inside is essential. I plant basil seeds on the surface of moist soil, cover lightly, and keep them under grow lights. Consistent warmth and light are critical. I've learned that basil seedlings grown in weak sunlight tend to sprawl and become leggy. Parsley, in contrast, germinates slowly. I start it in small cells with a humidity dome for up to 2 weeks. Over the years, I've learned that patience pays off. These herbs are not just flavor enhancers, they become an integral part of my spring and summer harvest. Celery is another vegetable I never sow directly outdoors in February. It's slow and finicky, but indoor sowing gives me a huge advantage. I use shallow seed trays, mist lightly instead of overwatering, and keep temperatures consistent. Celery roots are shallow and prone to rot, so I've learned to be very careful with watering. Starting indoors allows me to transplant healthy, robust seedlings into the garden once the soil warms, rather than waiting months for outdoor sowing. Getting the indoor environment right is as important as choosing the right vegetables. I use seed starting trays with drainage, light but nutrient rich soil, and LED grow lights when sunlight is insufficient. Temperature control is crucial. Too cold and seedlings stretch and weaken. Too hot and they dry out quickly. I monitor trays daily, rotate them for even growth, and adjust heat mats and lighting as needed. In my early attempts, ignoring these details caused entire trays of seedlings to fail. Now, consistent monitoring is part of my routine and ensures healthy plants every time. Once seedlings are ready for transplanting, hardening off is essential. I gradually expose them to sun and outdoor conditions over 7 to 10 days, increasing their time outdoors daily. I learned the hard way that skipping this step leads to wilting and poor survival. Proper hardening off dramatically improves survival rates and ensures a smooth transition from indoor trays to garden beds. Timing, sunlight exposure, and gentle watering are all critical. I also track a planting calendar carefully. Each vegetable has its window for sowing indoors, germination, transplanting, and harvest. Early on, I tried to rely on memory, and many seedlings struggled. Once I documented timing and noted germination and transplant dates, every season became predictable and much more productive. This calendar approach allows me to stagger seedlings and ensure a continuous, strong spring harvest. Starting these 10 vegetables indoors in February has completely transformed my spring gardening. The plants are stronger, grow faster, and produce earlier than seedlings sown directly outdoors. I've learned from failures, weak stems, poor germination, overcrowding, inconsistent light, and refined a system that consistently works. By mid-spring, my garden is thriving with robust tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, brassicas, lettuce, kale, herbs, and celery, all ready to thrive outdoors. I've spent years trialing, failing, adjusting, and documenting these methods so I could deliver this knowledge to you. The techniques I share are not theory. They are tried and tested in my own garden, season after season. If you follow this blueprint, you'll see the same results: stronger plants, earlier harvests, and more reliable yields. I've also noticed a psychological benefit. Seeing healthy seedlings grow indoors in February changes your mindset. You're not reacting to frost dates or rushing to sow seeds outdoors. You're ahead of the season. You're planning strategically. You're in control. And that control translates into confidence, better planning, and a more productive garden. I've done all this hard work to refine these techniques and deliver them to you so you don't have to go through years of trial and error. That's why it's so important to follow the system, track your seeds, monitor your seedlings, and plan carefully. If you want to replicate these results and get a huge spring harvest, make sure you subscribe to Garden Science. I put in the work so you can skip the mistakes and grow a garden that actually produces. Remember, start early, pay attention, track your progress, and follow the blueprint. Your spring garden will thank you, and you'll be ahead of everyone else with strong, healthy vegetables ready to feed your family. Subscribe to Garden Science so you never miss another guide that actually works.